They say that on the day when the earth first trembled, the birds fell silent 3 hours before something terrible. Then a very deep sound appeared, as if the planet itself had taken a breath and could not exhale. The cracks did not go from top to bottom, but from bottom to top, and what came out of them was not lava, not gas, not water. They came out monsters. The first descriptions were so confused that historians argued for a long time. Maybe people had gone mad from fear? Maybe it was mass psychosis? No, because cities were burning, because armies were scattering, because real weapons, combat weapons, steel weapons left no traces on them. Humanity retreated for 200 years, built walls, fled behind them, lost territories, lost people, lost hope. The monsters did not stop. They did not get tired. They did not negotiate and did not demand peace. They simply moved forward slowly, unstoppably, like a tide. And then something else happened. On one ordinary day, no one could explain why exactly, then an 18-year-old boy with a name no one remembers anymore woke up with changed eyes. Brown became blue, and he stopped a monster with his bare hands. From that day, everything changed. Awakening became reality. Academies became a necessity, and the world learned to live behind walls and wait for those whose eye color would change at the age of 18. His name was Kong Yuksan, an ordinary name, average height, average appearance, black hair, narrow shoulders, hands without any special calluses, not a warrior, not a worker. Quiet, observant, one of those people who are noticed only when he has already done something. On the night before his 18th birthday, he did not sleep, not from fear, not from excitement. He simply lay on his back and looked at the ceiling, thinking about what color his eyes would become. In their quarter by the eastern wall, green or gray usually appeared, sometimes blue, rarely amber. Once every few years, someone with violet eyes was born, and then the whole street buzzed for weeks. Such a person was taken immediately to the best block of the academy. Yuksan himself thought about green or gray, something standard, something with which one could work normally, receive a normal assignment, a normal faculty, and a normal life behind the city walls at a distance of one safe passage from the monsters. He closed his eyes, fell asleep, and in the morning opened them. The first thing he saw in the mirror was not his face. It was color, black, not dark brown, not gray-black, not coal-black with an amber rim. Black, absolutely, completely, as if the pupil had occupied the entire space of the iris and left nothing. Yuksan looked for a long time. Then he brought his fingers to his eyes, pulled down his lower eyelid, leaned closer to the glass. No reflection, no gradient, no shade, just black. He straightened up, blinked, looked again. Everything was the same, and the first thing he felt was not fear, a strange, quiet curiosity, because he had never heard of black eyes. No one had heard of them. His mother entered the room 10 minutes later. She was carrying breakfast, saying something about the exam, about the uniform, about whether he needed to take documents with him in 2 copies. Then she saw his eyes. The tray fell. She did not scream. She only stepped back and looked as if she did not recognize him. "Yuck, Mom," he said calmly. "I am the same." She covered her mouth with her hand. On her face was an expression that he could not read right away. Only later did he understand. It was not horror. It was a mixture of horror and something like awe. She carefully came closer, took his face in both hands, and looked into his eyes for a long time. "I do not understand," she finally said. "Me too," he answered. And that was exactly the truth. He walked to the academy on foot, and he felt the stares. Not hostile, not frightened, simply unbroken. People turned around. Children pointed with their fingers. One old man, who was trading at the corner, followed him with his eyes for so long that he almost dropped his tray. Yuksan walked evenly, did not lower his head, did not quicken his pace, because in his past life, that is, in yesterday's life, which already seemed different, he had learned one thing. If you show that someone else's opinion matters to you, it will destroy you. At the academy gates, there was already a line of new 18-year-olds. Blue eyes, green, gray. 2 with amber eyes exchanged smug glances. They knew the value of their color. And 1 with violet eyes, tall, broad-shouldered, already with the posture of a person who had been praised since birth, looked ahead with the air of someone who had come not to study, but to take what was his. Yuksan stood at the end of the line. A minute later, he felt them looking at him. Then more. Then someone quietly said, Are those black? And the line slowly, as if drawn by a magnet, turned toward him. The woman at the registration desk raised her eyes to him, began to say something about documents, and fell silent mid-sentence. Name, she said after a pause. Kang Yuksan. Date of birth. Today. She looked at his eyes once more, then pressed a button under the desk. 1 minute. 1 minute turned into 5, then into 10. Then a curator appeared. Tall, in a uniform with 3 stripes, a senior instructor. He looked at Yuksan with the expression of a person who had thought today would be a boring day. You are Kang Yuksan? Yes. Come with me. Yuksan took his bag and went. The line watched his back. The academy director's office was on the 5th floor of the main building. From there, the entire inner part of the city was visible. Straight streets, the roofs of residential quarters, distant walls with watchtowers. The director stood by the window with his back to the door. He was old, but not fragile. Broad shoulders under a uniform jacket, short-cut gray hair, hands folded behind his back as if they were used to holding something heavy. When Yuksan entered, the director turned around and fixed his gaze on him. For a long time. Not frightened, not confused. Like a scientist looking at a phenomenon that contradicts his theory. Kang Yuksan, he said. Yes. Sit down. Yuksan sat down. The director went to the desk, took a folder, and opened it. I looked at your pre-exam indicators. You did not take the tests ahead of schedule? No. Did not train with a coach? No. Where did the basic physical training come from? Yuksan shrugged. I have always moved a lot. The director nodded. Turn the page. Show me your eyes. Yuksan slightly tilted his head forward. The director came close, closer than most people had come that morning, and looked carefully. For a long time. Without hurry. Then straightened up. I have been working with the academy for 32 years, he said evenly. I have seen all colors. Violet. Red. Once crystal, only once. The only time in my life. A pause. I have never seen black. Yuksan was silent. And there is none in the archives for 400 years either. Silence again. The director returned to the desk. You will pass all the exams. Full protocol. Without exceptions. Understood. And if you pass them the way I suppose, the director continued, I will assign you to the Vanguard faculty. Yuksan raised his eyes. I have not passed a single test yet. I know, said the director, but I have seen your eyes. And I have a feeling that I have learned to trust over 3 decades. He closed the folder. You are dangerous. I do not yet know how, but dangerous. And dangerous people must be kept under control or turned into weapons. The academy prefers the second. The examination hall looked like an arena. Round. High ceiling. Observers with tablets along the perimeter and 2 curators by the side doors. The floor was made of a special synthetic coating, elastic but hard. Together with Yuksan, 8 more people entered the hall. The violet one was already present. Tall. Yuksan remembered him from the street. He learned his name a little later, Seo Miho, from a family of well-known awakened ones. His father was a Vanguard veteran. The other 7 were ordinary colors. The curator read the task. First stage. Body physics. Assessed. Reflex speed, strength potential, endurance, accuracy. Each test has a standard and a maximum score. You work in turn. Yuksan was 4th. He watched the others. Noted, most were well-trained. School preparation was visible, standard movements, correct but predictable mechanics. Seo Miho turned out to be fast, very fast. His reflex to the light signal was almost inhuman. When Yuksan's turn came, he did not think about the spectators. He thought about his body. Because since morning, from the moment he had seen his eyes in the mirror, something had changed inside. Not outside, no flashes, no sensations of power. Just a quiet, constant feeling that there was a little more space inside him. On the strength test, he lifted the standard without effort. The curator raised his eyes from the tablet. On the speed test, he reacted to the signal earlier than he himself expected. The curator fell silent. On the endurance test, 200 meters with a load, he finished with a result that did not fit into the standard. Because it exceeded it, the curator looked at the second curator. Seo Miho also looked at Yuksan. For the first time, this test was more difficult. In a dark room, several stimuli at once: sound, light, smell, floor vibration. The task was to correctly identify each source, not confuse them, and give an answer in the format from where, what, when. Most managed 70 to 80%. Seo Miho got 91. Yuksan entered, and felt something that he later could not explain for a long time. The room did not become brighter, but it was as if he heard more of it. Not only sounds, not only vibrations. Something else, very weak, on the edge of sensation, told him where things were coming from. As if space itself was giving him information. He gave the answers. When he came out, the curator looked at him for a long time. 100%, he finally said. The corridor became quiet. The last test was the most revealing. Not because it required strength, but because it required a decision. They were given a situation, 3 mannequins moving along different trajectories. The task was to neutralize the maximum number in the minimum time, using only one's own body and a wooden training blade. It was not a test of skill. It was a test of battle instinct. Most worked by pattern. First straight strike, second turn, third block, and counterattack. Seo Miho tore them all apart in time. Yuksan entered, looked at the trajectories, and did what no one expected. He did not go toward the mannequins. He stood in the center and waited. Exactly 2 seconds, until all 3 ended up at a certain point in space. Then 3 strikes. Sequentially, without pause, without losing balance. The first mannequin fell. The second had not yet managed to change trajectory. The third received a strike at the moment when it physically could not dodge. Total time, for seconds. The hall record was 8. The curator put the tablet on the table, stood up, and said nothing, because there was nothing to say. In the evening, he was called to the director again. This time, there were 2 more people in the office. A man in a uniform with 5 patches, a senior Vanguard master, and a woman with crystal eyes, who looked at Yuksan with such calmness as if she had already seen everything that would happen to him. The director opened the folder. Kong Yuksan, Physics 100, Perception 100, Combat Potential 100 with deviation toward non-standard tactics. Result, maximum score in all 3 sections. A pause. In 32 years, I have never had anyone like this. Yuksan remained silent. You are going to the Vanguard, said the director. First line faculty. Block A. The man with the patches frowned. We do not know his power. No one knows. This is a risk. I know, the director answered. That is exactly why he is going to the first line, not to the rear. The woman with crystal eyes spoke for the first time. Her voice was calm, like the surface of still water. Boy, do you know that your eyes are an anomaly? Yes, Yuksan answered. They will be afraid of you. And those who are afraid often do stupid things. I know. And you still want to go to the Vanguard? Yuksan looked directly at her. I want to understand what is inside me. And there, it will become clear faster. She nodded. Approvingly. Good. Vanguard Block, it was located in a separate wing of the academy. The main hall, 3 training arenas, an abilities laboratory, a medical station, an armory, and living rooms. Everything separate from the other faculties. Everything closed. The block usually had 20 to 25 people a year. Now 17. When Yuksan entered, silence met him. Everyone was already inside. He immediately read the arrangement. Seo Miho by the window, arms crossed. Already the leader without announcement. Violet eyes burning coldly. 3 by the left wall with red eyes keeping together, cautiously. 2 with amber eyes by the central stand silent, but listening. And the rest scattered around the room without any particular order, not yet having built a hierarchy. Seo Miho looked at him. For a long time. Black eyes, he said aloud. Not aggressively. As a statement. I have never heard of that. No one has, Yuksan answered. So you are an unknown variable. For now. Seo Miho nodded slightly. We will see. It was not a threat. It was an announcement of observation. Yuksan took a free bed by the far wall and put down his bag. The beginning had been made. The next morning, they were lined up in the lecture hall. The curator of Block A, Minter Lim Call, entered without introductions. He was not old, but with so many scars on his exposed arms and neck that age ceased to matter. Red eyes, not bright but dark, almost burgundy, looked at the audience without warmth and without anger. Simply straight. Welcome to the Vanguard, he said. I will not say that you are the best. You are simply those who were placed here. This will either be confirmed or not. He took chalk, a diagram on the board. We will start with the basics. The power of an awakened one has 3 layers. The first layer is instinctive. This is what comes by itself at the moment of awakening. For most, It is a defensive reflex or a primary impulse. You have already felt it. The second layer is operational. What you learn here: management, control, direction of power. This is work. The third layer is the core, the foundation, the nature of your power. Most never reach it. Some reach it by accident. A few consciously. He turned to the audience. Your eye color is not power. It is an indicator of the nature of your power. Violet is psychokinetics and perception. Red is destructive impulse. Crystal is time and space. Rainbow is multiple abilities. Understood? Everyone nodded. Lim Kal stopped his gaze on Yuksan. You. Yes. Your color is black. There has been no such thing. So I do not know your nature. And you do not know. This puts you in a unique position. Understood. This is not an advantage. This is a problem. Because without understanding the nature, you cannot train properly. Then I will move differently. Lim Kal looked at him. How? By process of elimination. Trying everything and seeing what responds. The mentor was silent for a second, then said, "This will take time." "I know." "Good. Then you receive a separate practice block. 3 times a week, an additional session with an abilities laboratory assistant." Yuksan nodded. This was the first concrete movement forward. 2 days later, they were taken out to the training arena. Not with weapons, with themselves. The task was simple to the point of deceptiveness: release power outward. Just that. One impulse. Directed. Controlled. Yuksan observed. Seo Miho raised his hand, and the air around it compressed, then sharply straightened. It was a pure kinetic discharge. Powerful, fast, with a beautiful violet gleam. 2 with red eyes released a wave of heat, hot air moving in front of them like something alive. For the first it was wide. For the second narrow and precise. The amber-eyed ones lifted small objects, basic level gravitational control. Yuksan stood up, stretched out his hand, and tried to do the same as the others, simply push something outward. Nothing. He tried differently, to pull. Nothing visible. Then he simply focused on the point in front of him and did nothing, only looked. And after a few seconds he noticed, the air in front of him had changed slightly. Not visually. Thermally. No, not like that. It had not heated up and had not cooled down. It became as if denser. Yuksan did not move, only looked, and gradually understood. Something similar to pressure arose around his gaze. Not physical, spatial. A small stone on the ground in front of him shifted slightly, by a centimeter. No one except Lim Kal noticed this. The mentor came over. "What did you do?" "I do not understand myself," Yuksan answered honestly. Again, he repeated it. The stone shifted again, this time by 3 centimeters, and in a different direction than before. Lim Kal squatted down and looked at the stone. "Interesting. This is not kinetics," said Yuksan, "because I did not feel power in my hands." "No, this is something else." "What?" The mentor rose. "I do not know yet, but this is already the second time you have done something for which I have no category of description." On the 23rd day of training, the alarm went off. Not a drill, a real one. The signal came from the northern wall. In 3 minutes, the entire vanguard was already standing at the gates in combat readiness, not as participants, but as reserve. The first line was occupied by professional defenders. Students were not yet allowed onto the outer field, but it was clearly visible. From the observation tower, Yuksan looked at what was coming from the side of the northern forest. 3 monsters. Middle class, he knew this from theory. Not the largest, not the most dangerous, but enough for professionals to work seriously. One of them, long, with a shell made of something resembling hardened basalt, moved straight toward the northern gates. 4 defenders stood in a triangle. The first with blue eyes released a stream of air that struck the area in front of the monster, slowing it down. The second with red eyes struck the shell with a direct discharge, and a crack ran across it. The third and fourth as a pair released something resembling a force net. The monster got tangled. And then the 5th defender, whom Yuksan did not notice right away, elderly, with almost white hair and violet eyes, simply raised his hand. And the monster stopped. Completely. Without a sound. Then slowly folded in on itself. It was high-level psychokinetics. Yuksan did not know a single word or description that could convey how calm and terrifying it looked. Seo Miho stood nearby. "That is Sangwon," he said quietly. "A veteran. 20 years on the outer field." "Violet," said Yuksan. "3rd level. A rarity." They watched below while the other two monsters were finished off smoothly and quickly. Then Seo Miho turned to him. What would you have done? Yuxan was silent for a moment. I do not know yet. But the first monster with the shell, I felt its structure. Even from here. What? Not visually. I simply knew where the weak spot was. Seo Miho looked at him for a long time. Are you serious? Yes. A pause. This is no longer zero, Seo Miho said quietly. This is the beginning of something. On the 31st day, the first internal conflict appeared. Not an open fight. Quiet, methodical pressure. It was done by one of the students, not from the vanguard, from the second-level support faculty. Tall, well-groomed, with second-category amber eyes. His name was Peak Songjun. He did not attack. He talked. In the corridors. In the common hall. In the zones where students from different faculties mixed. Did you hear? They took into the vanguard someone who has no power at all. Just black eyes. That is a defect, not an awakening. Why take to the first line someone who does not know what is inside him? That is a risk for the whole group. He is probably just normal on the outside. But if a real monster is placed in front of him, he will simply fall. Yuxan heard all of this, and for the first 2 weeks, he did not react. Because he understood the mechanics. Peak Songjun was afraid. Not of him personally. He was afraid of uselessness. His amber eyes were good, but not rare. In support, he was average. And the appearance of a black-eyed anomaly who had passed all exams with 100 gave him the feeling that his ceiling had become even lower. People whose ceiling is lowering shout the loudest. Minjun, that is, Yuxan, knew this from his past life. But on the 31st day, Peak Songjun crossed the line. He said it in front of Seo Ran. No, not in front of Seo Ran. This is another world. In front of Cha Yunji, a girl with silver eyes, who was the only one in the vanguard with a non-standard color that did not belong to the classical elite. She was from another city, quiet, competent, with an incredibly precise sense of space. And Peak Songjun said aloud in front of her, "Black eyes are a curse." In the old texts, it is written that the color black meant not power, but destruction. Such people are not controlled. They are dangerous to their own. Cha Yunji said nothing. But Yuxan stood around the corner and heard everything. He came out, stood in front of Peak. Silently, Peak Songjun looked at him with the same mixture of aggression and fear that Yuxan already knew how to read. Problem? Yuxan asked quietly. I am just telling the truth. No, said Yuxan. You are speaking fear. These are different things. You do not know your power. For now, Yuxan answered calmly. But you know yours and are still afraid. That is much worse. Peak Songjun took a step forward. You do not, said Yuxan. Something in his voice stopped him. Not a threat, not a shout. Just the absolute confidence of a person who does not waste strength on enemies who are not yet worth it. Peak Songjun stepped back. Cha Yunji looked at Yuxan. Had you been listening for long? From the beginning. She nodded. Thank you. No need, he said. But if it gets worse, tell me. And he left. It was important. Because from that moment, in the academy there appeared not just an anomaly with black eyes. There appeared a person whom people began to watch not out of fear, but out of interest. 3 times a week, Yuxan went to the laboratory. The room was small, with a sensor floor, several movable stands, and a special screen that recorded energy emissions during the awakening of power. The laboratory assistant, Dr. Lee Chonghua, a small man with green eyes, glasses, and the unshakable look of a person who was almost impossible to surprise, worked with Yuxan methodically. They went through kinetics, no direct emission; thermics, no temperature change in the hands; acoustics, no resonance; gravics, no standard field; spatial mechanics, partially, but not exactly. On the 4th session, Lee Chonghua said, "Do you know what field potential is? In theory, not in theory. Imagine, everything, every body, every creature has an invisible field, the state of their interaction with space. How they exist, how they are connected with what is nearby." Yuxan listened. In awakened ones, power usually affects one of these fields. Heat is thermal. Kinetics is mechanical. Psychokinetics is informational. And black? Lee Chonghua took off his glasses. I think, and this is only a hypothesis, without confirmation, that your power works with all fields at once. Not powerfully, not roughly, but subtly, meaning, you do not destroy, you restructure. The interaction of things, people, space. It is as if you change how things relate to each other. Yuxan was silent. That sounds abstract. Because there is no language for it yet, said Li Chonghua. But look at what you did in practices. The stone moved without a force impulse. In battle, you saw the monster's weak spot from a distance. You read space and influence it simply by existing in it. Yuxan thought about it. So I am not an attack. No, you are not an attack and not a defense. You are change. At night, lying in his bed in Block A, Yuxan looked at the ceiling. Nearby, 17 people with different eye colors breathed quietly. Beyond the academy walls stood the city. Beyond the city, the walls. Beyond the walls, everything humanity had built for thousands of years, protecting itself from a world that one day decided people were not strong enough. Yuxan clenched his fingers into a fist. Felt that same sensation again. Not power in his hands, but something quiet and very deep, as if a current passed beneath him, which he could not yet raise, but already felt its presence. Black eyes. Without history. Without precedent. Without a map. He smirked in the darkness. Then I will have to draw the map myself. The city walls had been built for 400 years. Layer by layer. Stone, concrete, reinforced metal, then a special compound that awakened ones with crystal eyes developed in the 3rd century of the war. The compound reacted to the magnetism of monsters and gave an alarm signal earlier than any observer. People got used to the walls. Got so used to them that they began to think of them as something permanent, as a natural phenomenon, as the horizon. That was a mistake, because monsters did not remember how long the walls had been built. Monsters did not respect the time invested in the masonry. Monsters were not interested in history. They simply walked. And one day, not when it was convenient, not when the weapons were ready and the formation was lined up, they walked toward where the wall was slightly thinner. That was exactly how the night of the 40th day began. Yuxan woke up 2 seconds before the alarm. Not from sound, from a sensation. Something in space shifted quietly, as if the air had become slightly heavier from the northwestern side. He opened his eyes, lay still for exactly 3 seconds, listening to the darkness. And then the siren went off. Block A rose instantly. Not because everyone was a hero, because they had been trained that way for the last 40 days. Alarm signal, feet on the floor, uniform, weapon, formation. Without conversations, without questions. Lim Call entered after 30 seconds. Northwestern section, lower level of the wall. Partial breach. Monsters are not inside, but pressure on the outer gates is critical. The professionals are already there. We are being requested as the 2nd echelon. Co Miho immediately asked, 2nd echelon means we are going? It means you are going to the support position. No independent action. No going beyond the line. You are students, not veterans. But if the 1st echelon does not hold? Lim Call looked at him. Then you will hold. It was said without pathos. Just a fact. They moved quickly, in a tight column. Yuxan walked in the middle and looked ahead. Cha Yunji was beside him. She moved quietly, with her face covered, but her fingers were clenched a little tighter than necessary. First time? He asked quietly. Yes. Everyone's first. Is that supposed to calm me down? No, he said honestly. Just a fact. She relaxed her fingers slightly. Ahead, what could already be heard was not a roar, not a crash. Something low, vibrating, as if the earth itself was displeased that walls stood on it. Co Miho walked first after Lim Call. His violet eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, almost imperceptibly. It was involuntary. Yuxan knew. When an awakened one is in a state of combat readiness, the eye pigment begins to react to the activation of power. He looked at his hands. Nothing. Black eyes do not glow. They simply remain black. The northwestern section looked worse than expected. The outer gates were holding, but the pressure on them was physically visible. The metal was slightly deformed on one side, and the support columns gave off micro-vibration that could be felt through the soul. The 1st echelon was working. 7 professionals. 2 on the wall with firing positions, 5 below in direct contact. But there were too few of them, because outside there were not 3 monsters. There were 9. Lim Call assessed the situation in 5 seconds. Co Miho, left flank, support the shooters. Cha Yunji, right, sensory control, report movement to me. The rest, central position, reserve. Yuxan stood in the center. And me? Lim Call looked at him. Observe. For now. It was insulting. But Yuxan did not argue. Because Lim Call was right. He was the only one whose power was not defined. Throwing an unknown variable into the center of battle was a risk not only for him, but for the entire group. He took position and began to observe. The monsters behind the gates were not the same. That was the first thing he understood when he began to truly look. Not with his eyes. With that very sense of space that had begun to manifest back in the laboratory. 7 out of 9 were standard. Shells, aggression, straightforward pressure. Strong, dangerous, but readable. But the two on the right flank were different. They were not pressing on the gates. They were going around. Slowly, carefully, along an arc that could not be seen from the shooter's position because of the corner of the wall. Yuxan turned to Cha Yunji. Right edge. 2 of them. They are flanking. She immediately shifted her gaze. I do not see them. You will not see them. They are behind the projection. But they are there. She hesitated for a second, then went to Lim Call and said what Yuxan had said. Lim Call looked at her, then at Yuxan. Where is the information from? Kong Yuxan. Are you sure? The mentor asked, coming closer. Yes. What is it based on? On the fact that I feel them, Yuxan answered directly. Their pressure field. They are not attackers, they are flankers. And they are already behind the third projection. Lim Call was silent for 2 seconds. Then shouted, right flank. Side position. 2 are flanking. 2 professionals rushed out immediately. And when they went around the corner, they found exactly what Yuxan had said. 2 monsters with a maneuver-type behavior 20 meters from an unclosed side passage. If not for Yuxan, they would have entered inside in 2 minutes. But the battle did not end because of that. Because while the right flank was being closed, the central pressure intensified. One of the large monsters, wide, squat, with a body like a living battering ram, accelerated and struck the gates so hard that the metal cracked along the seam. The first echelon stepped back. Lim Call shouted, Vanguard forward. Seo Miho center. Seo Miho moved forward. He raised both hands and released a wide kinetic discharge, a pressure wave that struck the monster in the chest and knocked it off its course. But the monster did not fall. It slowed down and went forward again. Seo Miho released a second discharge, stronger, more precise, concentrated into one point. The monster stopped, but 2 more were already coming behind it. The 2 with red eyes released a simultaneous heat impulse, not fire, but a concentrated thermal strike that pierced the shell of the left monster and forced it to retreat. It was good, but not enough, because the third monster came from the corner, where a dead zone had formed between the 2 groups, and it was heading straight for Cha Yunji. Yuxan did not think. He simply stepped forward, not with a shout, not with a raised weapon. He simply shifted and stood between the monster and Cha Yunji. The monster was large, about 3 meters, with elongated limbs and a head shifted downward, like a creature used to crushing with its weight. It looked at Yuxan, and Yuxan looked at it. At that moment, something switched. Not inside him. Around him, the space within a radius of 10 meters suddenly became different. Yuxan could not explain it in words then and could not explain it later. Simply everything that was in this zone became as if part of his perception. The stones underfoot, the air, the metal of the wall, the monster's body, its weight, its speed, its structure. He saw everything, not with his eyes, as if space itself was reporting to him. And he understood. The monster's left front limb rested on the ground with a skew. That meant the center of gravity was shifted. If the support under the right rear limb was removed at the moment of the dash, the beast would fall. Yuxan did not strike. He simply changed the point of contact. He placed his palm on the ground and felt something through it go forward, quiet, invisible, precise, like a surgical instrument. The monster lunged, and the ground under its right rear limb became unstable for 1 second. It did not collapse. It simply stopped being support. The beast fell, heavily, with its whole body, along an arc. And at that moment Lim Call was beside it and finished it with a precise strike to the unprotected neck. The battle lasted another 3 minutes. When everything was over, Lim Call came up to Yuxan, looked at him. What did you do? Changed its support. How? Yuxan raised his eyes. Through the ground. I do not know more precisely. I simply felt where the point was and what needed to be shifted. Lim Call was silent for a long time. Then he said quietly, only for Yuxan, this is not tactics. This is power. I know. First level of disclosure. Looks like it. Congratulations. It did not sound solemn, like a statement. But in the mentor's eyes, Yuksan for the first time saw something that had not been there before. Not just interest, caution. Because a person who can change the space under an enemy's feet with one touch of the ground is no longer a mystery. He is already a threat. When the group returned to the block, no one slept. Seo Miho sat at the table and looked into emptiness. He was physically fine, but his face was the kind people have when they first understand the difference between training and reality. Cha Yunji sat in the corner and bandaged her forearm, a small cut from a piece of the wall. The two with red eyes spoke quietly. Yuksan sat on his bed, took out a small notebook. He had been keeping notes since the first day, and began to write. Not a description of the battle, a description of the sensation. Because what had happened there could not be lost in memory. It was the first true manifestation of his power, and he wanted to record every detail. How it began, what was felt, where the point of contact was, why exactly the ground. Cha Yunji came over and silently sat beside him. You saved me. I was just nearby. Yuksan. He raised his eyes. Thank you, she said simply. He nodded. Next time, yourself. I know. She looked at his notebook. What are you writing? Describing the power. How it works. And how? Yuksan thought for a second. I think my power is not what I do to things. It is how I understand the connections between them, and can influence those connections. Cha Yunji thought about it. That sounds like something very deep. Or like something very small, he said. I do not know the scale yet. The next day, Seo Miho approached him himself. Yuksan expected anything. Seo Miho sat beside him on a bench in the training hall and was silent for a long time. Then said, You saw those two on the right flank before I did. Yes. And the monster that was going toward Cha Yunji. Yes. I saw neither one nor the other. Yuksan looked at him. You were focused on the center. I was focused on my power, Seo Miho corrected. That is different. You saw the whole space. I saw only where I directed my gaze. Yuksan was silent. I spent 18 years listening about violet eyes. About what it means. What it is worth. Seo Miho spoke evenly, without resentment, but with effort. Father said every day, You will be the best because you have the right color. And it turned out that color is only the beginning. Yes. A pause. Then Seo Miho turned and looked straight at him. I am not going to pretend that we are friends. I did not ask you to. But I want to understand how you work. Not out of envy. Out of logic. Yuksan nodded. Then we worked together in paired trainings. Yes. It was not friendship. It was professional respect, which in the Vanguard Academy is sometimes worth more. Peak Songjun did not calm down after that conversation in the corridor. On the contrary, he became quieter. And a quiet enemy is always worse than a loud one. Yuksan noticed this a week later. His name stopped sounding in the corridors in a negative context. But instead, other things began to appear. Small ones. Unnoticeable. Someone moved his weapon in the armory, did not steal it, just shifted it. A trifle, but not an accident. Someone left a folded sheet of paper without a signature on his bed. One sentence was written there. The color black absorbs everything, including those who are nearby. Yuksan read it and put it in his pocket. Not because he was afraid. Because it was information. Someone smart enough not to act openly. Someone angry enough to want not just to win, but to undermine from within. Someone who has access to Block A, and that means either a student or someone with permission. He began to observe. Lim Kal announced paired combat matches. Not with weapons. Only power against power. The rules were simple. Use your ability, neutralize the opponent, do not inflict serious injury. First pair, two with red eyes. Exchange of thermal impulses. Fast, loud, spectacular. One yielded after a minute and a half. Second pair, amber against silver. Gravitational control against spatial sense. More interesting. Longer. Silver won not by force, but by evasion. Third pair, Seo Miho against one of the red-eyed ones. This was already another category. Seo Miho did not let him unfold. He met every thermal impulse with a kinetic shield and extinguished it. Then with one precise discharge, he knocked the opponent beyond the line. Beautiful work. Fourth pair, Yuksan against a student with amber eyes named Kim Sanghan. Sanghan was sturdy, confident. His gravitational control was at the level of the first category, enough to lift objects weighing up to 100 kilograms and create pressure fields. He immediately began with a field pressure from above, a standard holding technique. Yuxan felt it. Felt it not physically, spatially. Sang-hun's pressure field was dense in the center and loose at the edges, like a dome with thin walls. Yuxan did not try to break through head-on. He stepped right, where the wall was thinner. The field compressed. Sang-hun reacted, moved the center. Yuxan stepped left. Reaction again. This continued for 30 seconds. Yuxan did not attack. He simply moved. And every step he took forced Sang-hun to reshape the field, spend effort, compensate. Then Yuxan crouched and touched the floor. Sang-hun felt something strange under his feet, not sharp, but soft, as if the floor had stopped being a reliable support for a fraction of a second. That was enough. Sang-hun lost concentration. The field fell apart. Yuxan stood up. Done. Sang-hun blinked. What did you do to the floor? Changed its response. How? I cannot explain more precisely yet. Lim Kal watched silently, then wrote something in his notebook. Seo Miho stood by the wall and observed with the expression of a person who sees a puzzle and begins to understand its principle. He appeared 2 days after the paired matches. A new student. A transfer from the Western Bloc of another academy. His name was No Hyunjun. Rainbow eyes. Yuxan had seen their description in theory, the ability for multiple powers, which theoretically meant the possibility of using several types of influence at the same time. A rarity. One in several thousand awakened ones. In practice, most often it meant chaotic control. The power exists, but it is difficult to control it. Hyunjun entered Block A with the air of a person who is welcomed everywhere with open arms. Tall, with a relaxed posture, a smile that said, I know I am rare, but I pretend that I do not know. He immediately looked around. Saw Seo Miho. I have heard of you. Violet second category? First for now, Seo Miho answered coldly. Honest. Then Hyunjun saw Yuxan. Looked for a long time. Black eyes. Real? Real. Is that even possible? Apparently, yes. Hyunjun came closer. I heard about you back in the Western Bloc. They said that in the Northwestern attack, one student with black eyes did something to the ground. Rumors travel fast, especially in the academy. Hyunjun smiled without snobbery, which was unexpected. I want to see how you work. Why? Because I have a lot of power without structure. You have an unknown power with a very clear structure. That is an interesting combination. Yuxan assessed him in 2 seconds. Smart, direct, ambitious, but without malice. Used to receiving attention, but does not lose his head from it. Good, he said. But first show how your power works. Hyunjun smirked. Honest exchange. I respect that. At the next practice, Hyunjun stepped into the center of the arena. Lim Kal observed with a neutral expression. Hyunjun raised his hand. And what began was what Yuxan later called beautiful disorder. First a flash of heat, then a kinetic discharge to the side, then something like an acoustic wave that made the air tremble, then an incomparable flicker around him, as if for 1 second he had become slightly less real. Powerful, diverse, absolutely uncontrollable. When he stopped, there were 3 burns on the arena floor, 2 dents and 1 crack in the wall. Hyunjun looked at the destruction with the expression of a person who had long been used to it. Something like that. Lim Kal coughed. You took the wall. It was a little in the way. That is a load-bearing wall. I will pay. Yuxan stood to the side and watched. Then said, you do not control the choice of power. They activate inconsistently for you. Hyunjun turned. I am trying. You are trying wrong. You are trying to choose, but first you need to listen. Whichever power first wants to come out at a specific moment, that is the one that should go. That sounds strange. I know, but try. Hyunjun looked at him. You explain my power better than I do, because I am looking from the outside. That same night, Yuxan found the answer to the question about the note. Not by himself, through observation. He noticed that one of the students of Block A, a quiet, almost unnoticeable young man with green eyes named Ri Chon, passed by his bed several times outside working hours. Not suspicious, if you do not know what to look at. But Yuxan knew. He waited. And on the 3rd night, when Ri Chon passed by again, Yuxan quietly said, sit down. He stopped. For a long time, then slowly turned around. Yuxan sat on the bed and looked at him. You wrote the note. Ri Chon was silent. It does not matter whether you deny it or not. I just want to know why. He looked for a long time, then sat on the neighboring bed quietly, like a person who had been caught not in a crime, but in exhaustion. Peak Songjun, he said. He sent you. He asked. Said it was just a warning. That you were dangerous. That the note would stop you. From what? He did not explain. Yuksan looked at him. Richon was not evil. Just a weak person whom someone had used. Do not do this again, said Yuksan. He will not do anything to you, because he has no leverage. And if he tries, tell me. Richon nodded. You are not angry? Not at you. You are a tool. Being angry at a tool is stupid. The next day, Yuksan found Peak in the common hall. Came over. Sat opposite him. Peak Songjun looked at him with superficial confidence. Do you want something? I want to understand, said Yuksan. What exactly? Why you need this? Notes. Rumors. Richon. You are clearly smarter than it looks. Peak narrowed his eyes. I do not know what you are talking about. You do. Yuksan leaned on the table. I am not going to expose you. I am truly interested. You are from a good family. Amber eyes, second-level support. You have a normal path. Why spend energy on me? Peak was silent. Then, unexpectedly, he said honestly, because you should not have gotten into the vanguard. Why? Because people like you do not exist. Something alive appeared in his voice, not evil, but frightened. Black eyes are not the color of power. They are something else. In the old texts I read, not for rumors, but out of interest, it is written that the color black appeared only once. 400 years ago, before awakenings. Yuksan remained motionless. And what happened to that person? Peak looked directly at him. Unknown. The records break off. Silence. You are afraid, Yuksan said quietly. Yes, Peak answered. Not of you. Of what you might turn out to be. It was the first honest phrase in all this time. Yuksan stood up. I also do not know what I will turn out to be, he said. But until I find the answer, there is no need to interfere with me. Not with me. Not with those nearby. He left. Peak Songjun watched his back. And something in his face changed slightly. Not friendship, but no longer only fear. At the next session with Lee Chonghua, Yuksan told everything. The battle, the ground, the sensation of space, the way he saw the monsters on the flanks. Lee Chonghua listened silently, then looked at the ceiling for a long time. I think your power works at the level of field interactions, he finally said. Not at the level of matter, not at the level of energy in the classical sense. At the level of how things are connected to each other. You said that before. I did. But now we have confirmation. You do not just read space. You rewrite it. Rewrite is too loud. No, it is exact. The ground under the monster did not collapse and did not explode. It simply stopped being support for a moment. You changed its physical status. Did not destroy it, specifically changed it. Yuksan thought about it. So my limit is how complex the connections I can change are. Exactly. Right now you are working with simple ones. Ground, support, space around a body. But if you develop this further, theoretically you can influence more complex connections. Between people. Between power and its source. Yuksan raised his eyes. Are you saying I can influence someone else's power? Theoretically, yes. Not suppress it, but change its direction, structure, point of application. Silence. That is a very dangerous ability, said Yuksan. Yes, Lee Chonghua agreed. That is exactly why the director was not wrong when he placed you in the vanguard and under observation at the same time. At night, Yuksan sat with his notebook again. But this time he did not write. He simply held it in his hands and looked into the darkness. Black eyes, an anomaly. The color black 400 years ago. Before awakenings. The records break off. A power that does not destroy, but changes. It was too many coincidences for chance. He did not yet know where this led. Did not know what stood behind the break in the records 400 years ago. Did not know what would happen when his power opened further. But he knew one thing. Every answer would require a new question. And every new question would be heavier than the previous one. He closed the notebook. Lay down. Beyond the academy walls stood the city. Beyond the city, the walls. Beyond the walls, monsters that do not get tired. And somewhere in the academy archives lay a 400-year-old record about a person with black eyes, which broke off suddenly. Yuksan closed his eyes. History is not what happened. History is what was allowed to be remembered. Yuksan understood this not from books. He understood it at the moment when he asked the academy librarian about the records from 400 years ago and saw how he tensed almost imperceptibly for a fraction of a second. Did not refuse. Did not say no. simply tensed, and then calmly answered that the old archives were located in a closed sector and were available only to the senior teaching staff. Yuksan nodded and left, but he remembered the reaction, because if the archive were simply old and boring, the librarian would not have tensed. People tense only when a question touches something they know more about than they say. The academy woke early. At 5 in the morning, the training arenas were already working. At 6, the lecture halls. At 7, all faculties were in full readiness. The archive wing opened at 8. But Yuksan came there at 5:30. Not to hack anything, not to break the rules, simply to look at the space itself. He walked along the outer corridor of the archive wing, closed doors, glass with matte film, the smell of paper, and something else, slightly metallic, and felt it. That same sensation he had already learned to recognize. A spatial trace. Someone had been here recently. Not the librarian. He had already learned to distinguish trackers by the density of the spatial traces they left. The librarian walked here every day. His trace was familiar, built into the background. This trace was new. Someone had come here this night. Yuksan remembered the point. The door at the far end of the corridor, which had no sign. Just a metal surface and a slightly fresher smell of metal near the lock. Opened recently. He told Chayenji about it. Not Seo Miho. He was too straightforward in his actions. Not Hyunjun, too noisy. Chayenji knew how to be silent and think at the same time. She listened to everything and looked out the window for a long time. Silver eyes give spatial sense, she finally said. I cannot do what you do, but I can read traces differently. If you want, I will go there with you. That is a violation of the rules. I know. You can be expelled. I know. Yuksan looked at her. Why? She was silent for a moment. Because notes, fear, and old archives mean that someone very much does not want you to find answers. And when someone very much does not want something, it means the answers are important. It was good logic. Good, he said. But first we need to understand who came there at night. The next day, a new lecture appeared in the schedule. Not from Lim Call. From Minter Ki Wan-jun, a historical theorist, one of the oldest instructors of the academy. Gray eyes, which meant he was not an awakened warrior. He was an analyst, a strategist. The lecture was called The First Wave, The Origin of Monsters and the Nature of Awakening. Yuksan sat in the first row. Ki Wan-jun entered slowly, with a folder of documents, which he placed on the table and did not open once during the entire time, because he knew everything by heart. 408 years ago, he began, what we call the first tremor happened. The earth cracked in 11 points at once. Monsters came out. Humanity began to retreat. He wrote on the board, 190 years of war without result. Weapons did not work. Strategies broke. People died. He stopped. And then awakening happened. The first awakened one, name unknown, the archives of that period partially lost. Yuksan jerked his gaze up. Partially lost. Not closed. Not classified. Specifically lost. He raised his hand. Minter, how could the archives have been lost? The academy should have copies. Ki Wan-jun looked at him for a long time, then said, good question. Copies exist. But part of the originals was seized during the second tremor 200 years ago. Seized by whom? Ki Wan-jun closed his mouth a second later than he should have. That goes beyond the scope of today's lecture. Understood. Yuksan lowered his hand, but wrote down, second tremor. Seizure of archives. By whom? After the lecture, Hyunjun caught him in the corridor. Heard your question, he said without introductions. And, I know something about the seized archives. Yuksan stopped. From where? My father is a researcher under the Central Council of the Awakened. He sometimes says too much when he thinks I am not listening. What did he say? Hyunjun looked around. Then, quietly, 200 years ago, after the second tremor, an organization was created. Not military, not academic. It was called the Order of the First Light. They studied the nature of awakening. Officially, and unofficially? Unofficially, they controlled which of the awakened received information about the origin of their power. And what was done with that information? A pause. Do they still exist? Hyunjun looked at him. Father never said directly. But once he said, some organizations do not die. They simply change their name. Yuksan stood quietly. The Order of the First Light. Archives seized 200 years ago. Records about Black Eyes break off 400 years ago. And someone came to the closed archive wing this night. They went at 4 in the morning. 3 of them. Yuksan, Cha Yunji, Hyunjun. Yuksan insisted on only two, but Hyunjun simply said, if something happens there, you need a power that can break a load-bearing wall. There was nothing to object to. The corridor of the archive wing at 4 in the morning was different. Darker, quieter, with another quality of air, more motionless, as if it had not moved here for a long time. Yuksan walked first, touching the space ahead with that very quiet sense that developed with every practice. The door without a sign at the end of the corridor. He stopped in front of it, touched not the handle with his hand, but the surface of the door, and felt. The lock was mechanical, but supplemented by something else. Not electronics. Something organic. As if someone else's power was built into the metal. He crouched. There is a protective ability here, he said quietly. Not an alarm. Specifically a power. One of the awakened placed it. Cha Yunji carefully placed her palm on the wall nearby. I feel a trace. Amber spectrum. Gravitational lock, said Hyunjun. I saw something like this in my father's study. The key is not physical, but force-based. A certain type of influence on the lock mechanism. Can you? Maybe. If I guess the type. Try quietly, said Yuksan. Hyunjun raised his hand. A small, almost invisible gesture. Not a flash, as usual. Quiet, focused work. 1. Nothing. 2. The lock trembled slightly. 3. Click. The door opened. The room was small. Shelves with folders up to the ceiling. A small table with a lamp. And in the center, a separate glass stand, in which several flat stone plates with engraved text lay. Yuksan immediately went to the stand. The plates were old. Very old. The engraving was not a modern font, but something archaic, yet readable. He leaned closer and began to read. The first plate was a catalog, a list of names, dates, colors. The second was a description of events. The third broke off in the middle of a phrase. Yuksan read quickly, seizing the main points. But in the 402nd year after the first tremor, a case of non-standard awakening was recorded. A young man of 18 years, origin unknown, appeared at the first gathering of the awakened with eyes of absolutely black color. The color was not identified by any of the analysts present. His power manifested not as an effect on matter or energy, but as a change in the conditions of interaction between objects. Analyst Chan Hasu described it as rewriting the rules of space. During the first tests, it was established the young man is capable not only of reading spatial connections, but also of changing their fundamental parameters. In one documented case, he stopped a Class C monster without physical contact by changing the nature of gravity within a radius of 20 meters. Yuksan raised his eyes. Hyunjun stood behind his shoulder and read the same thing. That is you, Hyunjun said quietly. No, Yuksan answered. That is someone 400 years ago, but it is your power. Yes. He returned to the text. But in the 6th month of observations, a second-order anomaly was recorded. The young man began to show the ability to affect not only physical space, but also the power of other awakened ones. Not suppress, but redirect, change the point of application, change the nature of the interaction of power with its bearer. Part of the Council of the Awakened considered this a threat. An isolation procedure was initiated. The young man refused. As a result of the conflict, the text broke off, literally in the middle of the phrase. Yuksan ran his finger along the edge of the plate. A chip. Fresh, relatively, maybe 100 years, maybe 200. Someone had deliberately broken the plate. Hyunjun looked at the chip. They destroyed the ending. Not all of it, said Cha Yunji. She held in her hands a small fragment found behind the stand. Here. Yuksan took the fragment. There were only a few words on it. He was not destroyed. He was locked away. The place of imprisonment is known only to the Order. The Order keeps the key. Silence. Long. The Order of the First Light, said Hyunjun. Yes. They locked him away? Looks like it. Cha Yunji quietly. Locked away means he was alive. 400 years ago. Yuksan did not answer, because he was thinking about something else. The first person with black eyes. The same power. The same description. The council got frightened and tried to isolate him. He refused, and was locked away, not killed. That meant only one thing. His power was dangerous enough that killing him did not work. When they were leaving the room, Yuksan felt a shift in space. Someone was standing in the corridor. He raised his hand, stopped the others. Went out first. He Wanjun stood in the corridor, the historian mentor, at 4 in the morning, in the archive wing. He looked at Yuxan without surprise, without anger, with relief. I was waiting for you to come here, he said. Have you been waiting long? Since the day I saw your eyes. Yuxan stood evenly. You knew? I knew that it was possible. Not when and not who. Are you from the Order? He Wanjun shook his head. No, I am from those who watch the Order. Those are different things. A pause. Go back inside, he said. We need to talk. They sat down in that small room. He Wanjun placed his own folder on the table, worn, tied with string, and opened it. I will tell you what I know. Not everything, because not everything is known even to me, but enough for you to understand what you have found yourselves in. Yuxan nodded. The Order of the First Light was created officially 200 years ago, but unofficially, it has existed since the moment of the First Awakening. Since that very young man, whose name? Kong Il, He Wanjun said quietly. Yuxan froze. Kong. His surname. Coincidence? Hyunjun asked. He Wanjun looked at him. In such matters, I do not believe in coincidences. Silence. Kong Il was the first awakened one with black eyes. The mentor continued. His power allowed humanity for the first time to stop not one monster, but an entire wave. He changed the nature of their interaction with space. Temporarily, but enough to win the first major battles. Then why was he locked away? Cha Yunji asked. Because the council was not afraid of the monsters. They were afraid of him. Why? He Wanjun was silent for a moment. Because his power had no known limit. And because in the third month he began to understand something that broke their entire picture of the world. What exactly? The mentor opened the needed page in the folder. The monsters did not appear by accident. The first tremor was not a natural disaster. He raised his eyes. It was an answer. The silence in the room became different. Not just quiet. Dense. An answer to what? Yuxan asked. He Wanjun turned the page. Kong Il, with the help of his power, managed to read the nature of the monsters. Not as organisms, as structures. And he understood. They are not living beings in the full sense of the word. They are a consequence. A mechanism. A mechanism of what? Correction. Hyunjun quietly. Correction of what? People before the first tremor were doing something that disturbed the balance. Not in an ecological sense. In a spatial one. Their activity, their collective force in a world where awakening did not yet exist, created increasing pressure on the fundamental connections of space. He Wanjun closed the folder. Monsters are not an attack. They are the immune response of reality. And they will not stop until the pressure is removed. A long pause. And Kong Il understood this, said Yuxan. Yes. And proposed another path. Yes. And the council was frightened, because another path meant that their whole system of academies, vanguards, walls was meaningless in the long term. He Wanjun looked at him. You think fast. I am just completing the logic. Yes. Exactly. They built weapons, trained soldiers, erected walls. And Kong Il said, this is symptomatic treatment. Until the cause is eliminated, monsters will keep coming. They locked him away so he would be silent? They locked him away because his power allowed him not to fall silent even in confinement. He could influence the space around him. They could not kill him. They managed to isolate him. Temporarily. Temporarily? He Wanjun opened the folder again. The last record I found is dated 120 years ago. The Order recorded, the isolation is weakening. They are looking for a way to strengthen it. Yuxan looked at his hands. Or to find a new bearer of the same power in order to use it to reinforce the lock. Silence. You guessed that yourself? He Wanjun said quietly. Yes. And you are right. Cha Yunji turned sharply. They want to use Yuxan? Possibly. Or control him. Or eliminate him if that does not work. Hyunjun stood up. Then we need to leave right now. No, said Yuxan. Everyone looked at him. If I leave, they will know that I know. Right now we have an advantage. They are not sure that I found the archive. I need time. For what? Yuxan raised his eyes. To become strong enough that there will be no point in controlling me. On the 48th day of training, the monsters attacked again. But this time not the northwestern section. 3 points at once. This was new. In the entire history of the Academy, a simultaneous 3-point attack had happened twice. Both times it preceded a major wave. Lim Call raised Block A to full combat readiness. This time not the second echelon. You are going into direct contact, he said. The professionals are closing the eastern and western points. We are the northern one. There is a breakthrough there. Seo Miho checked his hands. The violet gleam was already pulsing. Hyunjun was unusually focused. Cha Yunji closed her eyes for a second and opened them. Yuksan stood quietly and already felt the northern point. 7 monsters. No, 8. One different. Heavier. The structure is different. Not a standard type. There is a large one there, he told Lim. How many? 1. But it is a class higher than middle. Significantly. Lim Call looked at him. Sure? Yes. Then we changed the scheme. When they came out to the northern position, Yuksan immediately saw it. The large monster stood behind the line of smaller ones, like a commander. It did not attack. It watched. This was strange and frightening at the same time. Because monsters that watch are no longer just a correction mechanism. This is already something with behavior, with tactics. Yuksan remembered Qi Wanjuan's words. They are a consequence, a mechanism. But this one did not look like just a mechanism. Lim Call lined up the group. Seo Miho and the 2 red-eyed ones, front. Cha Yunji, sensory control. Hyunjun, reserve for breakthrough. The others, flanks. And me? Yuksan asked. You are center. This was new. Me? You feel the large one. That means you will give us direction in real time. It was not the position of a fighter. It was the position of a coordinator. Yuksan understood at once. Lim Call was already thinking about his power not as an individual weapon, but as a systemic instrument. That was correct. The battle began abruptly. The small monsters rushed first. Seo Miho released a wide kinetic barrier, not an attack, but a wall. Slowed the first wave. The 2 red-eyed ones struck precisely, burned through the shells of 3 beasts, forcing them to retreat. The flanks held. Yuksan stood in the center and watched. Not with his eyes, with space. He felt each one, where it moved, where it was going, what its weight was, where its weak spot was. And he spoke. Left flank, second from the edge, it is going behind the stone. 10, 3 seconds. 10, a student with amber eyes, moved. Intercepted. Cha Yunji, 2 parallel ones on the right. Both are flankers. She processed the right. Hyunjun, left one, with a short precise impulse without unnecessary destruction. Seo Miho, the large one is starting to move. Straight ahead. Seo Miho turned around. The large monster moved slowly, heavily, as if every step was a decision. It was of another class. Yuksan felt its structure and immediately understood the problem. Ordinary methods would not work. It had no weak spot in the physical sense. Its shell was not just hard, it adapted to impact. A thermal strike, it would become heat-resistant. Kinetics, it would reinforce the point of pressure. A correction mechanism with adaptive defense. Yuksan approached Lim. It cannot be hit directly. Then how? Yuksan thought quickly. If its defense adapts to impact, that means it has an adaptation delay. Microseconds. If we hit it with several different types of power at the same time, it will not have time to restructure. We do not have coordination of that level. We do, said Yuksan. If I choose the moment. Lim Call looked at him. Can you? I will try. Seo Miho, Hyunjun, both red-eyed ones. Listen to me, Yuksan said in a full voice. Strike only on my command. Exactly on mine. Not earlier, not later. Seo Miho did not argue. Nodded. Hyunjun too. Yuksan moved forward. Stood in front of the large monster. It stopped. Watched again. Yuksan began to read its space. Surface structure. Adaptation layers. Restructuring speed. The point where the delay was maximal. The joint of 2 adaptive zones, between the shoulder segment and the neck. There. He touched the ground. And began to do what he already knew how to do, but on a larger scale. Change the nature of interaction. Not with the monster directly. With the space around it. The ground under the monster began to slowly restructure its response. Not collapse. Simply become less predictable for its weight. Micro-shifts. Unnoticeable. But gradually forcing it to transfer weight. The monster swayed slightly. Its adaptive defense focused for a fraction of a second on the lower segment. Because that was where instability was felt. And at that moment Yuksan shouted, Now? The joint between the neck and shoulder. For strikes at once. Kinetics from Seo Miho, narrow, precise. A thermal impulse from the first red-eyed one. An acoustic wave from Hyunjun. Gravitational pressure from Sanghan. For different types of impact into one point in one fraction of a second. The adaptive defense did not have time. The joint split apart. The monster made a sound, low, almost infrasonic, and fell. Not immediately. Slowly. Like a tree that had been cut at the root. When it lay down, the ground beneath it trembled. And everything went quiet. The group stood silently. Seo Miho looked at the defeated monster. Then at Yuxan. You used us as parts of one strike. Yes. And it worked. Yes. Seo Miho fell silent for a long second. I spent 18 years thinking that violet eyes were the peak, he said quietly. And you are only beginning. Yuxan looked at him. You are also only beginning. No, You thought your power was everything, Yuxan said directly, but without malice. But just now you became part of something that you could not have done alone. That is not weakness. That is another level. Seo Miho was silent for a long time. Then, for the first time, he extended his hand. Yuxan shook it. It was not reconciliation. It was the beginning of something real. The next day, Ki Wanjun waited for him after the lecture. The mentor's face was more serious than usual. They know that you were in the archive. Yuxan was not surprised. When did they understand? I do not know exactly. But this morning, one of the senior instructors requested information from the director about your night movements. Who? Mentor Chan Missen. Third-year logistics. Officially, an administrative instructor. Unofficially, the order. Yes. Yuxan nodded. What will they do? First observation. Then an attempt to include you. They do not destroy power. They appropriate it. And if they fail to include it? Ki Wanjun looked straight at him. Then isolation. Like with Kang Il. Yuxan was silent for a moment. Then I have time until the first attempt at inclusion. A little. They act methodically. Then I need to know one thing. Where Kang Il is locked away. Ki Wanjun froze. You think he is still? They did not kill him, said Yuxan. They isolated him. His power did not disappear. Otherwise the order would not continue strengthening the lock. That means he is somewhere. Even if so, it has been 400 years. I know. But if his power works with the nature of space, perhaps time works differently for him. Ki Wanjun looked at him for a long time. You are already thinking like him, he said quietly. Because we are the same. At night, Yuxan sat in Block A and looked at the black ceiling. Everyone around was sleeping. Seo Miho evenly, like a person used to recovering efficiently. Hyunjun sprawled out, with his hand hanging from the bed. Cha Yunji quietly, almost unnoticeably. He thought. Kang Il 400 years ago. The same power. The same nature. The same understanding. Monsters are not enemies in the ordinary sense. They are a symptom. The order knows. And still builds a system of war, because war is control. Control is power. He clenched his fist. Not from anger. From understanding. The path opening before him was longer and more complicated than simply becoming the best fighter of the vanguard. It was a path to the cause. To what stands behind the monsters. To what existed before the first tremor. And to the person locked away for 400 years who, perhaps, knew the answer to everything. Yuxan opened the notebook and wrote one word. The most dangerous people are not those who come with weapons. They are those who come with an offer. Because with weapons, everything is clear. Either you are stronger or you are not. Either you run or you withstand. That is simply physics. But with an offer, it is different. They come with an offer when they have already studied you. When they know what you want. When they have found the word that will hook exactly you and not someone else. Yuxan understood this at 6 in the morning on the 53rd day, when Minter Chan Missen stood in the doorway of the training hall and looked at him with the smile of a person who had long had a conversation ready. It was then that Yuxan understood. The order had come. The logistics mentor of the third year was short, neat, and very calm. Amber eyes of the second category, judging by his age and calmness of movement. Not a fighter. An organizer. A person who had never been on the front line, but always knew what was happening there. People like that are dangerous. They do not make mistakes in emotions, because their emotions are always under control. Kang Yuxan, he said, I have heard about your successes. Thank you. Not as a compliment. As a fact. You passed the exams with 100 points. You coordinated the group during the attack of a higher middle-class monster on the 48th day of training. This is the first such case in 20 years at this academy. Yuxan did not answer. Chan Missen came closer. I want to offer you something. I am listening. There is a research program. Closed. For awakened ones with non-standard abilities. There, they study the nature of power more deeply than the standard educational process allows. Who finances it? Chan Misin smiled slightly. An independent research council. Is that an official organization? With official registration. Yuksan noticed the difference between an official organization and with official registration. They are not the same thing. But most people would not have caught it. What does the program give? Access to deep-level archives. Individual training with masters who are not in the academy. And most importantly for you, help in identifying the nature of black eyes. We have worked with anomalous cases before. Yuksan looked at him. You have worked with anomalous cases, he repeated. Does that mean with someone specific? With several. In different periods. And what happened to those people? A pause. Very short. But it was there. They received a full understanding of their power, Chan Misin said evenly. That is not an answer to my question. The mentor's amber eyes remained calm. Some continue to work with the program. Others we do not track. They left of their own will. Yuksan nodded. I need time to think. Of course. Chan Misin took from his pocket a small card with one symbol. If you decide, this is a pass to the first meeting. No obligations. Just a conversation. Yuksan took the card. Thank you. The mentor left. Yuksan looked at the card. Simple. Without text. Only a symbol, 8 petals around the center, resembling stylized light. The order of the first light. They were not hiding. It was either confidence or a trap. Most likely both. He gathered them in the evening. All 4 of them. Seo Miho, Cha Yunji, Hyunjun, and Ki Wonjun, whom he invited through a note to the instructor's cell. Ki Wonjun came last, closed the door, and looked at the card that Yuksan had placed on the table. They offered you to enter, the mentor said without a question. Yes. Fast. For them, that is normal. They do not wait until you come yourself. They come first, while you still do not know enough to refuse with knowledge. Seo Miho took the card, examined it. The symbol of the order? Yes, said Ki Wonjun. They use the symbolism openly? Within a certain circle, yes. It is their way of sorting people. Those who see the symbol and do not know are safe. Those who know and still go have already half agreed. Hyunjun looked at the card. Are you going to go? Yes, said Yuksan. Silence. What? Cha Yunji looked sharply at him. I need to understand what they know about Kang Il. And where he is. I will not learn that from the outside. It is a trap. I know. But a trap has one property. It only works when you do not know about it. I know. Seo Miho put the card back. If you go with an exit plan. Of course. And we must know the plan. Yuksan looked at him. You are my insurance. If I do not make contact within 48 hours after the first meeting, you go to the director. Not to Chan Misin, not to other mentors. Only to the director. Does the director know about the order? Ki Wonjun answered. The director knows that dark structures exist. He does not know their full nature. But he is not in the order. I can say that for certain. Then he is our backup option, said Yuksan. But first I go myself. Cha Yunji looked at him. Are you not scared? He thought for a second. I am scared. But that does not change the logic. 3 days before the meeting with the order, the academy announced the inter-faculty tournament. It was an annual event. Students of all faculties competed in combat pairs, team battles, and strategic simulations. The winners received the status of priority assignment, the right to choose specialization after graduating from the academy. For the vanguard, it was important. For the order, even more so. Yuksan understood this on the second day after the announcement, when he noticed Chan Misin was too calm about the tournament. Not like a logistics mentor who should have been worried about organization, but like a person who already knows the result. The tournament was a cover. For what? He did not yet know. But he knew exactly. Something would happen during the tournament. Something that the order would use for its own purposes. Either for a demonstration of power, or for the isolation of a specific person, or for something more complicated. He told Ki Wonjun about this. The mentor was silent for a long time, then said, 7 years ago, during a similar tournament, a student with rare crystal eyes disappeared. Officially, an accident during a combat match. What actually happened? No one proved anything. But a month before that, the student began asking the same questions as you. Yuksan nodded. So the tournament is their method of isolation. Legal. In the crowd, in chaos, among real matches, no one will notice. Yes. Then I need to understand. Which of the tournament participants works for the order? Lim Kal drove block mercilessly for the last 3 days before the tournament. In the morning, physics and power. During the day, tactical schemes. In the evening, team battles among themselves. Yuksan worked at full strength and observed in parallel. On the third day, he found what he was looking for. Two students from the first-level support faculty, not from the vanguard, not from attack, were behaving strangely. Too calmly before the tournament. Spoke too little. And one of them, tall, with dark green eyes, once in the morning passed by Chan Missen in the corridor and received a look from him. One look, without words. A signal. Yuksan remembered the face. Peak Kangho. Support faculty. Ability, sound control. Can create directed acoustic waves that disorient the target. An ideal tool for an incident in a crowd. Yuksan told Hyunjun. He said simply, "Then during the tournament I will be near you. Not as insurance. As a second observer. You can miss your matches. No, I will enter my matches, win quickly, and return." Yuksan looked at him. "Sure?" Hyunjun smiled. "I have rainbow eyes. Fast as mine." The tournament arena was larger than the training zones. Open, with stands, with markings for different match formats. Students of all faculties, about 200 people. Instructors along the perimeter. The director on the central stand. First day, individual matches. Yuksan entered in the third round. His opponent was a student with blue eyes from the second-level attack faculty. Air control. Fast, maneuverable, well-trained. The match lasted 80 seconds. Not because Yuksan was significantly stronger physically. Because he read every movement of the opponent a fraction of a second before it began. When the opponent raised his hand for an air strike, Yuksan had already shifted. When he tried to create a vortex around Yuksan, Yuksan changed the point of support under his left foot, a micro shift, almost unnoticeable, and the opponent lost balance on the exhale. Yuksan stepped beyond the line at the last moment, when he was falling, and the judge recorded the victory. The stands were quiet after this match. Not applause, the silence of surprise. Because no one understood what exactly had happened. Everyone saw that the opponent fell. No one saw how Yuksan did it. Seo Miho fought in the fifth round. His opponent was a student with first-category red eyes from the Western Bloc who had come to the exchange tournament. Strong. Experienced. With a direct-type attack without unnecessary tactical refinements. Seo Miho finished the match in 40 seconds. Cleanly. Technically. Without a single unnecessary movement. The stands were already shouting. When he returned to the vanguard zone, Yuksan said, "Good. I know," Seo Miho answered. Without snobbery. Just a fact. "You control the emission better than a month ago. I worked on the concentration point. You talked about it after the third paired practice. Remember?" "I remember useful things." Yuksan nodded. This was a different Seo Miho than the one who had met him on the first day. That one had been a self-confident loner who measured the world by the color of his eyes. This one was learning to measure the world by result. Hyunjun came out in the seventh round. He had promised quickly. He did not lie. 22 seconds. His opponent, a student with amber eyes, did not have time to understand what had happened. Hyunjun used 3 different powers in a row. First, a small thermal impulse, not for striking, but for distraction. Then an acoustic wave from the side for disorientation. Then a kinetic push to the knee, quiet, precise. The opponent fell. Hyunjun was already walking away. 22 seconds. A new tournament record for the last 5 years. Hyunjun returned and stood beside Yuksan. "Are you satisfied?" Yuksan asked. "Moderately. I could have done it in 15, but then it would have been too noticeable." "You deliberately slowed down?" "A little. Rainbow eyes at full strength attract too much attention. I do not want anything unnecessary." Yuksan looked at him in a new way. Hyunjun was smarter than he seemed. Much smarter. On the second day of the tournament, team matches. Block A against a combined team of the second-level support and attack faculties. From the very beginning, Yuksan kept Peak Kangho in his field of view. He stood at the edge of his team. Calm. Almost unnoticeable. He was not preparing for the match. He was positioning himself. Yuksan understood. He would not participate in an honest match. He was waiting for the moment. The match began. Block A worked cohesively, already a different level of coordination after the joint battle with the monsters. Seo Miho held the center. Hyunjun worked the flanks. Chai Yunji provided spatial control. Yuksan coordinated again, and at the same time watched Peak Kangho. On the third minute, he saw. Peak Kangho raised his hand. A small, almost invisible gesture, and directed an acoustic wave, not at the opponent in the match, into the crowd of spectators. At a specific point, where Ki Won-jun was standing, Yuksan reacted instantly. He stepped out of the match, a violation, and touched the wall beside the stands with his palm. Felt the acoustic wave as pressure in space, and changed its path. Did not extinguish it, redirected it. Directed it upward, into the ceiling, where it dispersed without consequences. Ki Won-jun felt nothing, but Pete Kangho felt it. He turned around sharply, not in a combat way, but in confusion, because his power did not reach the target, but he did not understand how, and met Yuksan's gaze. He looked straight at him. Calmly, Pete Kangho turned pale. Block A won the team match. When everything was over and the students were dispersing, Yuksan approached Pete Kangho in the corridor. He wanted to leave, but Yuksan stepped in such a way that he blocked his path. Not aggressively, simply appeared where he was going. I do not need a scandal, Yuksan said quietly. I need information. Pete Kangho was silent. You work for Chon Missen. Silence. Who were you supposed to neutralize? Ki Won-jun. A long pause. Then Pete Kangho exhaled. Not neutralize. Disorient. So that he would not be present at the tournament final. Why the final? I do not know. They do not tell me why. Only what? Yuksan looked at him. What will happen at the final? I do not know, he repeated. Sincerely, judging by his voice. Honestly, I was used as a tool. They offered me a place in the program. Promised access to training that would raise my category. Yuksan recognized this scheme. The order did not force. The order offered what people themselves wanted. Leave the final, he said. If I leave, they say you got sick. Anything. Leave. And do not contact Chon Missen anymore. And if they come to me, then go to the director, said Yuksan. Tell him everything you know. That is your only safe way out. Pete Kangho looked at him. Why are you helping me? Yuksan was silent for a moment. Because you are not an enemy. You are a frightened person who is used. These are different things. The best fought in the tournament final. Vanguard against an inter-academy team. Exchange students with 3 rare colors. It was a real combat match, not a demonstration. Ki Won-jun was present. Pete Kangho kept his word and left. The order lost a tool, but not its intention. On the 10th minute of the final match, Yuksan felt it. Not a monster. Not an acoustic wave. Something completely different. A subtle change in the space under the arena. Not an attack. A structural shift. Someone below, under the arena floor, was working with space. Slowly, methodically, with professional control. It was an awakened one of a very high level. He was preparing something under a specific point of the arena. Yuksan stopped in the middle of the match. Felt the point. Found it. The center of the spectator's stand. The director's box. They were going after the director. Not Ki Won-jun. The director. Yuksan rushed to the edge of the arena. Stop. He shouted at the top of his voice. The match stopped. The judge raised his hand. Everyone looked at him. Someone is working under the arena, he said loudly. The director's box is under threat. A second of silence. Then an explosion of movement. Lim Kal reacted first, jumping over the barrier toward the stands, shouting to security. Seo Miho behind him. Hyunjun was already running to the side exit under the stands. And at that moment, a strike came from beneath the arena floor. Not an explosion. A spatial collapse, small, local, but directed exactly at the load-bearing support of the director's box. The structure began to sag. He was already there. Not physically, spatially. He touched the wall by the stands and released everything he had. Not a strike. Not an explosion. Quiet, broad, deep work. A change in the nature of interaction between the load-bearing structures and the point of collapse. He could not stop the collapse, but he could change its direction. Instead of sagging inward, the structure began to shift outward. Slowly, in a controlled way. The director's box sagged, but did not collapse. The director managed to stand up and step away 1 second before his chair shifted to the side. Security pulled out the remaining people. After 30 seconds, the stand collapsed. To the side, into empty space. Without casualties. Yuksan stood by the wall, his hands lowered. His fingers were trembling. Not from fear. From effort. This was the largest scale on which he had worked. An entire structure. Dozens of tons. Lim Kal approached him first. Looked at his hands. Then at the collapsed stand. Then at him. You did this, the mentor said. Not a question. Changed the direction of the collapse. The whole building? Only the support point. The rest went on its own. Lim Call was silent for a long time. This is the second level of disclosure, he finally said. Possibly the third. I do not know. I know, said Lim Call. I have seen many awaken ones. What you just did is not student level. Hyunjun and 2 professional guards found the one who had been working below. An awakened one with high-category blue eyes. Not a student. An adult, about 35 years old. He was already trying to leave through a technical tunnel. He did not leave. Hyunjun stopped him with one acoustic strike in a narrow corridor, then calmly sat beside him on the floor and said, "Stay calm. I will not hit again if you do not give me a reason." He stayed. When security came, they found on him a card with the symbol of 8 petals, a list of 6 names, and a small crystal with an encoded spatial pattern, a ready-made tool for structural collapse. Yuksan saw the list of names later. The director's name was first. His own was third. The director summoned Yuksan to his office that same evening, not through a curator. Personally, when Yuksan entered, the director stood by the window, the same position as the first time, as if he always returned to this place to think. He turned around. "You saved my life. I changed the direction of the collapse." "It is the same thing." The director approached the desk. "I know about the order," he said without introduction. "Not everything, but enough. They have existed longer than this academy. And today they crossed a line I did not expect. They were going after you because you know something," said Yuksan. The director looked at him. "Or because you are here, and they need to remove the people who can protect you." A pause. "You know about Kang Il?" said Yuksan. A long silence. Then the director sat down. "Yes. Where is he?" "I do not know exactly, but I know who knows." "Who?" The director took an old map from the desk drawer. Not digital, paper, drawn by hand. Beyond the northern borders of the residential sectors, there is a place officially listed as an unstable space zone. Neither monsters nor people go there. It has been unstable for 400 years. Yuksan looked at the map. Unstable because someone is holding the lock there. Or someone is locked inside the lock, said the director. "I do not know the difference. But the order knows. And that is exactly why they guard this zone through intermediaries. I need to get there." "I know. That is exactly why I am telling you." Yuksan raised his eyes. "You are helping me?" The director was silent for a moment. "For 32 years, I have watched how the order controls information. How they choose who knows what. How they remove people who begin asking inconvenient questions." He folded his hands. "Today they tried to kill me. That changed my position." Yuksan nodded. "I need a week." "Why?" "To become strong enough for whatever may be there." The director looked at him. "You do not know what is there." "No. But I know that any lock that is held for 400 years requires either very great power outside or very great power inside. And in both cases, I need to be ready." 7 days. Yuksan worked as he had never worked before. Not only physically, that went without saying. Lim Call gave him separate training, every day setting new tasks for scale and precision. But the main thing happened in the laboratory. Lee Chonghua formulated 3 tasks. First, expand the radius of spatial perception. For now, Yuksan worked confidently within a radius of 20 meters. That was not enough. Second, learn to work with someone else's power. Not suppress, not copy, but read its structure and know where it is vulnerable to redirection. Third, find his core. The third task was the most difficult. The core is what your power comes from, Lee Chonghua explained. Not control, not technique. The source. Most awakened ones never find it. They work with the second layer their whole lives. How to find it? You do not search. You listen. Power always shows where it comes from, if you are quiet enough inside. Yuksan listened. Every night after training, after conversations, after planning, he sat in complete silence and simply listened to himself. On the 4th night, he felt something. Very deep. Not power. Not pressure. Space inside himself. As if in the center of his being there was a place that no other thing occupied. Empty, but not with the emptiness of absence. With the emptiness of possibility. He did not yet understand what it meant. But he remembered the sensation. On the 6th day, Seo Miho came to him himself. Without an invitation. Sat opposite him and was silent for a long time. Yuksan waited. "I want to go with you," Seo Miho finally said. "It is not necessary." "I know. But I want to." "Why?" Seo Miho was silent for a moment. "Because over the last 50 days, I have understood more about how my power works than in the 18 years before that. Because you see things that no one else sees. And because he stopped. Because if you do not return, it will be a waste, he finally said. Without pathos. Simply. Yuxan looked at him, then nodded. Good. But you follow my instructions there. No independent action. Agreed. And Hyunjun. He already asked when we are leaving. Of course. And Cha Yunji. Yuxan smirked. Did she ask or simply say? Simply said. Then 4. Seo Miho stood up. Tomorrow? Tomorrow. But Chan Missen came that same night. Not with a threat. With a new offer. He appeared in the corridor of Block A at 11:30. Calm, as always. Amber eyes in the semi-darkness, quiet, almost good-natured. I heard about the tournament, he said. Everyone heard. You saved the director. I changed the direction of the collapse. Cha Missen nodded. You already speak more precisely. That is a sign of growth. What do you need? A direct conversation, he said. Without cards and offers. Just a conversation. Yuxan stood by the wall and waited. The order was not created to harm, said Chan Missen. This is important to understand. We were created for control. Not power for the sake of power, but control for the sake of stability. Stability for whom? For everyone. If Kang Il was right, if monsters are truly a symptom and not the cause, then what will happen when people learn this? Panic. The destruction of the system. Academies, vanguards, walls, all of this will collapse because no one will understand what to do next. And so they simply die for a meaningless system. For a working system, Chan Missen corrected. Imperfect, but working. People are alive. Cities stand. Behind walls. Yes, behind walls. But alive. Yuxan looked at him. You want me not to search for Kang Il. I want you to understand the price. I understand the price. But I am interested in the other side. What is the price of your system for the next 400 years? Chan Missen fell silent. The monsters will not stop. Yuxan continued. You know this. Each tremor is stronger than the previous one. Walls will not save forever. This is not stability, it is a delay. A pause. You are a smart boy, Chan Missen said quietly. I am just completing the logic. Then complete it to the end. You alone will not change the nature of the monsters. Even if you find Kang Il. Even if you understand the cause. Alone? No, Yuxan agreed. But I am not alone. Chan Missen looked at him for a long time. Then said something Yuxan had not expected. I will not interfere with you. What? Tonight, I will not. What happened at the tournament? It was not sanctioned by me. There are people in the order who act more harshly than I consider necessary. If you find Kang Il, and he says something that changes understanding, bring it back. Without revolution. Without panic. You want to control information even in that case. I want information not to kill the people it was supposed to save. Yuxan looked at him. Chan Missen was not an evil person. He was a person who had chosen a certain side and lived with it long enough to become part of the system even in those places where the system was wrong. Good, said Yuxan. I will bring back what I find. But not to you. To the director. A pause. The director thinks softer than you. I know. That is why I am bringing it to him. Chan Missen nodded slightly. And left. Early the next morning, for students of the Vanguard faculty stood at the northern gates of the inner sector. Seo Miho with violet eyes, quiet in the dawn light. Hyunjun with rainbow eyes, which shimmered almost imperceptibly in the morning air. Cha Yunji with silver eyes, looking forward evenly and calmly. And Yuxan with black eyes, which did not glow in any way. They simply looked. Behind them stood Lim Kal. He said nothing, simply nodded. That was enough. Yuxan turned north. Somewhere there, beyond the unstable space zones, beyond 400 years of silence, beyond the lock that the order held, was a person with the same power. The first, with the same name, with the same black eyes, and with answers that could change everything. Yuxan took the first step, and the others followed him.